a Canadian man luckily won a ticket to a hockey game. But what happened next was like a movie full of twists and turns. The final twist was absolutely unexpected. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the HEMA Investigation Bureau. I'm HEMA. You might have noticed I have a new look, and I want to especially thank a fan friend who helped me redesign this new image. As a newcomer with just over 10,000 fans online, Abuju, I'm truly honored. Here, I want to sincerely thank this fan friend for the strong support. I will also work hard to create more videos to give back to all the friends who like this channel. Now, let's get back to today's story. The story takes place in October 2003. Two-year-old Mike Bridge is a young man from Brandon, Canada. That day, he participated in a lottery event and was lucky enough to win a prize. Travel voucher to Calgary to watch a hockey game. The organizers not only gave away free tickets to the hockey game, but also covered all travel expenses. To clarify, Brandon is about 1,200 kilometers from Calgary, so it was quite a long trip. Mike was, of course, very happy because that year had not been going well for him, as he had been struggling to find a job, which led to difficulties in his life, and his girlfriend broke up with him that year. So this win made him feel like he finally caught some good luck before the year ended. Mike happily set off on this trip. On the day of the hockey game, Mike arrived at the arena early and found his seat to sit down. Shortly after he sat down, a man with a mustache walked over to him and took the empty seat next to him. Before Mike could say a word, the man excitedly said to Mike, "Hey, buddy, did you know I won the ticket through the lottery?" Mike was very surprised and said he had also won the ticket through the lottery. This coincidence brought these two strangers quickly together. The man introduced himself as Brock, and during the game, they kept chatting, and the two got along as if they had known each other for a long time. Happy times always fly by, and the hockey game ended, but Mike and Brock still felt unsatisfied. So Brock suggested going to a nearby bar for another drink. Mike gladly agreed. The two then went to a club, continuing to seek fun. During this process, Mike noticed that Brock seemed to be very wealthy. He casually gave big tips to Jubao and Wuniang, handing out large bills, showing considerable generosity. Of course, all their expenses were paid by Brock. However, what puzzled Mike a bit was that Brock didn't look like a social elite. To put it simply, based on his appearance, he didn't look like a wealthy person. This made him curious about Brock's exact profession. But since they had only just met that day, it wasn't appropriate to ask directly such a personal question, right? So they stayed at the bar, playing until late at night, almost time to say goodbye. Mike sincerely expressed his thanks to Brock, saying that with his financial situation, he couldn't afford such a lifestyle. At the same time, he felt very lucky, not only to have won tickets to the hockey game, but also to have met such a generous person like Brock. However, for him, life had to return to reality, as he would return to Brandon's hometown the next day. Just then, Brock suddenly said in a very surprised tone, "Brandon, what a coincidence. Because of my job, I'm actually moving to Brandon." When Mike heard this news, he was not only shocked, but overjoyed. He had originally thought this day was just a rare, lucky day in his ordinary life. But if he could befriend someone as wealthy as Brock, a friend like that, maybe he could completely change his struggling life. Brock seemed to see through Mike's thoughts at this moment. He already knew from their earlier conversation that Mike was unemployed, so he said to Mike, "Hey, friend, if you can help me find a suitable apartment in Brandon, help me find a suitable apartment, I can recommend a job for you in return. What do you think?" You can imagine, Mike, of course, agreed without hesitation. A few months later, Brock really moved to Brandon, and Mike also found him an apartment that met his requirements as promised. That day, they were having lunch together at a restaurant, and Brock said to Mike, "Our company is currently looking for a runner. The job is very simple, but the pay is quite good. Are you interested?" Mike asked about the specific salary, and to his surprise, they were offering a runner's wage several times higher than the market rate. Could it be that Brock's company really was very powerful? Mike immediately said he was willing to accept the job. But then Brock said, although the job is simple, just delivering some goods, there is one condition you absolutely must not break, which is that you cannot look at nor ask about what exactly you are delivering. Upon hearing this, Mike suddenly understood a bit. Brock's company was probably not involved in any legitimate business. He began to hesitate internally as well. But when he thought about how generous Brock was, compared to his own difficult life, it was like night and day. He dreamed of living a life like Brock's, and besides, he was just a lowly runner. Even if they truly were involved in illegal activities, first, he was completely unaware, and second, his position was low, so he probably wouldn't get into too much trouble. Holding on to this hope, Mike decided to accept Brock's job. So, following Brock's instructions, Mike started delivering some packages in Brandon. At first, he was very cautious and nervous, but after doing it for a while, nothing happened, and Mike gradually let down his guard, becoming more and more confident in what he was doing. Of course, he strictly followed Brock's rules, never asking what exactly was inside the packages. After some more time, Mike gradually adapted to this lifestyle. Although he was officially working for Brock, they still maintained a good friendship in private, often eating and chatting together. That noon, after finishing their meal at a restaurant, Brock drove Mike home. Just then, Brock's phone rang, and he answered the call. From his tone, Mike quickly figured out that the person on the other end was the company boss. Their conversation was brief. Brock kept saying, yes, yes, okay. Then he hung up the phone. After hanging up, Brock's expression suddenly turned very serious. Mike clearly felt the atmosphere inside the car completely change. Then, at the next intersection, Brock suddenly made a U-turn, driving the car in the opposite direction. Brock didn't say a word the whole way, and Mike didn't dare speak either, just quietly sitting in the passenger seat. Brock drove the car into the parking lot of a motel. Then, in a very serious tone, he said to Mike, stay in the car and don't move. Mike felt extremely nervous inside, not knowing what was happening. He just nodded obediently. Then Brock closed the car door and walked toward a motel room. He knocked on the door, and the door opened. A woman opened the door, but the moment she saw Brock standing there, her eyes suddenly widened in fear. She tried to close the door again, but Brock pushed it open with force. Brock held the door with one hand, and with the other hand pushed the woman back inside. The woman was shoved to the ground. Brock then straddled her, his fists raining down on her like hail. Mike, witnessing this from inside the car, was stunned, too scared to even breathe, silently, praying that no one else would see this. Fortunately, it wasn't long before Brock stood up. From Mike's view inside the car, he could just see the woman's face, bloodied and motionless on the ground, not knowing whether she was dead or alive. Brock then closed the door, calmly walked back to the car, started the engine, and drove off. Brock still didn't say a word the whole way, and Mike was trembling in fear. Though Mike had already suspected Brock was up to no good, he never imagined it would involve violence and crime. Brock dropped Mike off at his doorstep, then finally spoke for the first time. If you tell anyone what happened today, you're dead. Mike obediently nodded and said, of course, I won't say a word. A week passed, during which Brock didn't contact Mike again. Then one afternoon, Mike's phone rang. During that time, Brock never contacted Mike again. Then one afternoon, Mike's phone rang, and seeing the number, it was Brock calling. At that moment, he had the first thought of not wanting to answer, but he knew he had to pick up. Brock's tone on the other end was very calm, as if nothing had happened. He told Mike that there was a package to be delivered today and asked if he was still willing to continue working for the company. Mike's gut told him he should refuse and cut off all contact with Brock from now on. But at the same time, he realized he was already too deep in this, and if he wanted to turn back now, it probably wouldn't be so easy. And most importantly, he needed this job. He knew there was no place else where he could earn this much money. So Mike steeled himself and agreed again. Brock said, good, the boss really appreciates your silence. Then he hung up the phone. 2 more months passed. Arriving at February 2004, nothing unexpected happened during this time. Mike continued his daily routine of delivering packages and he still often had dinner with Brock. Of course, always paid for by Brock. One day, Brock invited Mike to meet at a restaurant again. When Mike arrived at the restaurant, he noticed Brock seemed a bit restless that day, clearly troubled by something. So Mike asked him what was wrong. Brock lowered his voice and said to Mike, "The boss is very satisfied with your performance these past few months. You've kept your promises, never looked inside the packages, and have kept quiet about the motel situation, all of which makes the boss very happy. Now, the company needs to promote some mid-level managers internally, and I think you have a good chance." Mike felt both nervous and excited when he heard this. First, he wondered, how did they know that I never looked inside the packages? There must be some special marks on the packages. Luckily, I never opened them. Otherwise, not only would I have lost my job, but my life might have been at risk. Secondly, once he takes a mid-level position, he might be able to earn about the same as Brock. Although his current income is already much better than before, he was gradually becoming unsatisfied with his current life and wanted to make more money. So he said to Brock, "Really? Then what do you think I should do to get a chance at promotion?" After thinking for a moment, Brock said, "You know, in our line of work, loyalty alone isn't enough. Sometimes we have to use some special methods to handle certain matters. If you can prove your ability to the boss, I believe you have a great chance of getting promoted." After hearing this, Mike fell into deep thought. He knew very clearly what special means Brock was referring to. He had already witnessed it at the motel. After working for a few months, he gradually became numb to danger and crime. So, after a brief moment of reflection, Mike finally spoke. "I understand. I'll prove my ability to the boss. Actually, there's one thing I haven't told you, and if you knew it, you wouldn't doubt my ability at all." Brock said, "Oh, really? What is it?" At this moment, Mike leaned close to Brock's ear and whispered softly, "Do you remember I told you I had a girlfriend before? I killed her." After hearing this, Brock looked at Mike in shock and said, "Really? If that's the case, I think it's fine. How about this? I'll discuss with the boss first, then arrange for you to meet him." A few days later, Brock told Mike that the boss was ready to meet him. The meeting place was a local upscale hotel. So that day, Mike arrived early at the hotel lobby, feeling very nervous inside. He knew this meeting was basically an interview, and if he passed, he might have a bright future from then on. If he failed, not only would everything be in vain, but his own life could be in danger. Until the appointed time passed, Brock arrived late. He led Mike into the hotel elevator, then to a room door, swiped the key card, and opened it. Mike took a deep breath and walked into the room. It was a rather luxurious guest room, no doubt expensive, but the room was empty. So Mike asked, "Where's the boss?" Brock smiled knowingly and said, "The boss never waits for anyone, only others wait for him." Mike thought to himself, "That's true." So he sat down with Brock in the room, waiting for the boss. As time ticked by, Mike grew increasingly anxious. Brock also clearly noticed Mike's nervousness and unease and said to him, "You don't need to be nervous. How about this? While the boss hasn't arrived yet, you tell me your story again, just like a rehearsal." Mike thought that was a good idea, so he retold everything that had happened to him from start to finish. He repeated it from beginning to end. It turns out that 2 years ago, Mike was dating a girlfriend. Her name was Alan Sidney. But after they had been together for a while, Sidney felt they weren't compatible, and she proposed breaking up. This made Mike extremely angry. So one night, he found an excuse again and invited Chini to his house. Then, he first choked Chini unconscious and then drowned her alive in the bathtub. Finally, he dumped her at the landfill. Since the police never found Chini's body, they couldn't prosecute him. Mike believed that his experience was enough to convince the boss that he was the right person capable of doing the job. Just after Mike finished his story, the doorbell rang. Brock said it seemed the boss had arrived, so he stood up and opened the door. But when Mike saw who was standing at the door, he suddenly realized that he had made an unforgivable mistake. Seeing this, surely the smart viewers have already figured out that all of Mike's experiences these past few months had been a carefully arranged trap. From the moment he won the prize, he had been gradually falling into this trap, and the one who planned it all was the Canadian police. Because in the case of Alan Cheney, they couldn't find the body, so they couldn't prosecute Mike. They carefully orchestrated this textbook-level sting operation. It was a textbook-level sting operation. Brock's real identity was actually an undercover agent with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. He exploited Mike's greed, step by step, leading him into the trap. The packages Mike delivered daily were actually just ordinary flour. And the woman at the motel was also an actress. The bloodstains Mike saw were all fake, made with professional special effects. After months of preparation, the police believed the time was right, so they arranged the final act. They installed pinhole cameras and surveillance cameras in the hotel room in advance, allowing Mike to confess his crimes in front of the camera. Until the moment Brock opened the door and the two officers rushed in to restrain him. When they burst into the room and restrained him, Mike finally came to his senses. But unfortunately, it was too late. In the end, under Mike's direction, the police successfully found Cheney's body and gave her a proper burial. In the end, Mike was convicted of intentional homicide and sentenced to life imprisonment. All right, that's today's story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and share. Your support is my greatest motivation to create. Let's meet again in the next video.